Hello, everybody. My name is Lynn Yanyo. I'm the Executive Director for the Institute for the Study of Business Markets, and you've joined our town hall today. I hope that's what you intended to do, and you're going to spend a great hour with us. We're going to be talking about communicating with customers. So before we get too deep in this, I want to just tell you a little bit more about who ISBM is. ISBM, the Institute for the Study of Business Markets, is a collection of companies that are interested in supporting the research in B2B marketing, universities and faculty that do those research, and a lot of other partners, some of whom are with us on the phone today, who can help us become better about what we do in B2B marketing as a business. Let's also talk about how we will participate in this with Zoom, maybe by 2.5 months of this. Now you're comfortable with Zoom, but if you haven't, let me just tell you a few things about what's on the Zoom screen. If you roll over at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a toolbar. And on that toolbar, you'll have the choice for connecting with us. So at any moment during this whole town hall, if you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat room and I will see that if you send it to me or send it to everyone. My name is Lynn Yanyo and you can choose. And then I will make sure that Ralph gets that question. If you'd like to ask your question verbally, please raise your hand, and you'll see that down at the bottom of the chat window. You can put up your hand if you're in the participant window, and that will allow me to see that, and then we can call on you. For bandwidth and reasons just for distraction, please leave your video off, and please leave your mics off unless you're asked to speak. And if you have any other questions or any other concerns, feel free to type that into the chat window too. We'll be seeing that. So that's how we work together. Let's introduce the folks we have here. So Ralph Olivia is Emeritus ISBM Director. Ralph preceded me, and many of you will remember him. And so Ralph will be moderating today's discussion with Bob Thomas and Laura Patterson. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Ralph, to go ahead and introduce everybody.
Great, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. A heartfelt welcome to all of you. I know some of you that are on the line, some of you are new to me. I've been involved with this network now for the better part of 3 decades, and I love being together with business-to-business marketers. For those of us who've chosen this particular field, we are a brotherhood, sisterhood of people who understand this discipline and learn from one another. So thank you very, very much for being here. Our objectives here this afternoon for an hour is to gather some ideas, some case histories, some thoughts. And this is an interactive discussion. This is a town hall, so this will be less a presentation, much more of a Q&A, kind of like a TV talk show here. But we're looking to help us better navigate the current time in terms of customer connection. But also, for most of us, we're starting to take a look and turn our attention to what's coming next, okay? So let me introduce our 2 friends who are here with us today. First of all, Laura Patterson has joined us. She's down in Austin. Laura has been a friend, personal friend, and a colleague of ISBM for quite a long while. We're both veterans of the semiconductor wars, and Laura has her scars, and I have a few of mine that we can show from being sort of frenemies. She was at Motorola while I was at Texas Instruments in a past life. Laura is well known as the high priestess of marketing metrics-driven business marketing. And in fact, she has several books. This one, Marketing Metrics in Action, is a really good one to have in your library if you're a business-to-business marketer. This is a very realistic approach to how you can put metrics on your marketing planning that really are the ones that will help you, make mid-course corrections as you go. But the latest book that she has delivered is Fast Track Your Business, a customer-centric approach to accelerating growth. Another one I would really recommend. And in that, she's set up quite a, I don't know if you can see this or not, it's probably not the best way to do this, but this circle of traction that she has set up is a great model for how to drive organic growth by the numbers in business to business. So I'd recommend both of these to you. Some of you might have more time to read, but I don't know. I'm hearing that more time may be a bit of a myth as we move on to a Zoom meeting. Another special pleasure to now be introducing Bob Thomas. So Laura is the high priestess of marketing metrics in action. Bob is the high priest of segmentation marketing in business markets. I don't think anyone knows more or was taught more about how to segment markets in the business to business situation than Bob. Bob is professor of marketing at the McDonough School of Business down in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown. Bob and I have been road warriors together, out teaching on business to business in a wide variety of places. And his content on the essential approaches to building business to business marketing plans are an important part of almost anywhere you go to learn about this. So I'd say, Laura and Bob, thanks so much for being with us today. Welcome to you. We hope to keep this interactive. Just a few other words to begin. We'll be using polls today to get a temperature on, certain issues that this community is addressing. And as Lynn was saying, please be sure to use the chat feature for any questions or other things that you might want to be asking us to keep this discussion interactive. As I was discussing, I used to be a business guy, but now I'm a professor. So I may reach out to some of you and kind of cold call you to see. I know my students just hate it when I do that. You may hate me too, but I plan to do it. Also, though, on a serious note, I have a real problem with the term social isolation. Physical isolation, we understand that, to do that, but we don't need to be socially isolated now. We need one another more than ever. So an important enjoyment for those of you out there, if we can be of help to you, or you can be of help to one another, reach out to one another or reach out to us. And of course, our thoughts and prayers go out to all of you who may be dealing with health issues, family issues, and other issues, and especially to those on the front line helping us through this time. So thanks to all of you who are doing that. So as we get underway, I'm going to move right to poll number 1 to get a general temperature of how things are going here. And again, I'm sorry for the colloquial nature of these choices, but I think you get the feeling. And remember, there is an incredible spectrum of feeling going on right now. Really, there are people who have been up against some very hard times, and it's pretty gloomy and doomy, on up to people who feel, well, I got this, I'm riding this horsey. So please take a second and from 1 to 5, is it gloomy and doomy, but I guess I'm okay. Number 2, it's bad, but I see the clouds lifting. It's stressful, I'm handling it. Or I got this, I see the light at the end of the tunnel. So take a minute and just weigh in on this scale for us, if you would, just to get a temperature of those of you who've joined us here. We have quite a few people on the line now. So go ahead and vote. We'll count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And Lori, if you'd play the results back for us. Okay, so we see this is a shift from the last time. People are starting to move up to the idea that, the clouds are lifting. But I think it's important to remember that we're all dealing with our customers and our families with a great spectrum of emotion now. So, physically isolate, socially do not, would be my suggestion. So with that, Lori, if you could go back to that slide, anyone would do. I'm going to jump on in here. So let's start with a question, and we have some questions that have already come in, but I'm going to jump to Laura right now. Laura, it looks like in many cases now we see people looking to the other side of this crisis. So what are the 1 or 2 things you think businesses need to do to prepare for as we come out of this? And what's marketing's role in this? And could you give us your views on that to get us started?
I would love to, and thanks for having me. And it's such an honor to be able to share this platform with all of you and with Bob Thomas especially. So I happen to agree with some of the responses in the poll where folks were, I guess 67% of the people who responded are beginning to, even though it's still stressful, beginning to see movement in a positive direction. And I think that is true. And we had a post come out today because people are starting to ask this very same question. And one of the things that I keep asking folks is, what is your debrief process? How are you as an organization going to take time to understand what has transpired in your organization, what it means, what are the lessons that you've learned, what are the things you're going to keep, what are the things you're going to jettison, what are the things that you need to do better? I think those are some important questions before we just roll into next, right? And so I'm hoping that everyone is starting to think about how to have that kind of conversation. And I truly believe that marketing plays an integral role in that conversation, because so much of what has been going on is how we are not only collaborating and communicating with each other using all these tools and agile processes, but how have we been leveraging those with our customers and our partners, right? And so that's a really important conversation that marketing needs to participate in. So that's my thinking. I'd love to know what other people are thinking.
Yeah, well, let me, and again, if we'd love to, that's a good set of questions to be asking. But it's time to focus on this. What are we going to keep? What are we going to do different? What is working? What isn't working? And it might be time to really inventory that right now. I'm going to jump to Bob here. And so we're dealing with these challenges right now. But, you know, this business of customer connection, like we've heard that salespeople and Bob and I, we had a great discussion on this in terms of what are the things we normally do to connect with customers right now? You know, take someone to dinner, you know, sit down and have a drink or a cup of coffee. You can't do that now. What are some options that you've investigated for dealing with customer connection now, and suggestions as we move to the next step? Well, Bob, you're muted here, I can see, so you're going to need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah. Thank you, Ralph, and thanks for the wonderful introduction. On the on the charts, it shows that I was with Applied Marketing Science.
Yes, I noticed that.
I love Jerry dearly, and I would love to work for him, actually. But that's another story.
Yeah, we can arrange for that another time. This is one of the interesting parts of this kind of connection.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things here. First of all, I think we all know, there's nothing new here, that we've been entering a digital world. And the area, I think, in B2B, we're slightly behind B2C in terms of how we use the tools available to us in this digital environment, where we are bombarded by information and technology at all times. And if we were to ask ourselves the question, what's the greatest value of all of this technology? One would say connectivity. And probably most importantly, it's connectivity with our customers. How do we get and maintain good connections with our customers? Of course, in the last 4 to 6 weeks, a lot of those connectivities have been broken. I don't know that they've been damaged, but certainly they've been broken and jarred completely in many respects. And the question becomes, how does one start to go back and recover, rediscover, review, and evaluate how to improve that connectivity? So I'm thinking of that both as an academic who wonders about these kind of questions. How do you actually bring back the conversations that you had? How do you take them to new conversations? And what are the technologies that you would use? Because the face-to-face right now is going to be limited initially, I think. And there are a variety of tools that the doors are open for us in many ways to be creative here. And I guess that's the first thing I'm going to recommend, is that let's be creative in how we think about communicating with customers using digital technology. Absolutely applied design thinking tools and methods to figure out what are some of the ways that we can actually do this. And I've talked to some companies where it's not just their customers that's problematic for them, but it's also their suppliers. It's also some of their downstream distributors where everything is kind of closed up. And so sometimes to get to customers, it may be necessary to even think about ways of working with the value chain to open up some additional doors to be able to better connect with your customers. Now, I could keep talking on this forever, but I'll just start with this one point, and I would love others to jump in on this. And that is, how can we better use digital connectivity to connect with customers where the relationship or the conversations we've had with them have broken, and not just a customer thinking of it as an organization, but all the people involved in the purchasing in those organizations. The buying centers have been fractured in some ways. Companies personnel may not even be talking to each other. People in a buying center that you market to may not even be communicating internally. So it'll be interesting to think about some creative ways to bring together people within the organization in a buying center.
Boy,
so
that is a very interesting point. Okay, because the most recent research I've seen for a business-to-business buy now, there's between 5 to 7 people involved in the buying center now. And as you know, each of these people probably has a different view of what value is as they're going after it. It's interesting, in the before times, before this happened, getting all those people together in one place often involved a physical impossibility.
That's right.
But now you could probably really now more than ever decide to have a Zoom meeting with the whole buying center and really get everyone together at once, and you would have permission to do that now. Whereas if, I don't know, physically, I've tried to do this inside visits to customers. Doing that physically is very, well, no, John is over here and he's over in Sheboygan and he's busy in another meeting. You could actually have a Zoom meeting now with an entire buying center.
Yep.
And
not only doing that now, but doing it as a way forward, to think about how to establish it now, and then use it as a way forward to keep that connectivity going beyond the virus situation that we have in other bad situations.
Yeah,
now, one of the things we just mentioned quickly, by the way, if any of you are doing that or have any ideas on that, raise your hand and let's make this a dialogue, okay? Otherwise, I'm going to start cold calling.
Well, I'd like to
Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in while people are doing that and kind of piggyback on this, and I think it is a really good point. I think that people are overwhelmed right now by the number of Zoom meetings. Everyone I talk with, both customers and partners and colleagues, are working harder than ever, those that are working. And in more meetings, Zoom or otherwise online meetings than ever before. I know my company has been virtual since 2001, and I have done more Google Hangouts, Zooms, GoToMeetings, Microsoft Team meetings in the last 6 weeks than I probably did in the last 20 years. And so what I think is important is, I'm going to add a word in, and it's the word, 2 words, deliberate and intentional. Mm-hmm. I think that as we go into communicating with customers, partners, colleagues, that we have to think about having a deliberate and intentional dialogue and being really clear. So the old days, we would go into a meeting and we always had these rules like, be sure you have an objective for the meeting, be sure you have an agenda for the meeting. But we really were kind of very undisciplined about that, many companies, right? I don't think we can do that going forward. I think we're going to have to be more disciplined, more intentional, more deliberate, so we can be more engaging. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult and challenging to be productive and get what we need done and really serve our customers and support our suppliers. So I would love to know if anyone else feels that those are important characteristics, the intentional, the deliberate, the disciplined, because we do have the tools. And I cannot tell you how many times I hear this little ding on my computer of someone who is like right now, impromptu, would like to do a Google chat. So I'd love to know what other people are doing around that. Anybody have some thoughts?
Okay, well, again, I'm first of all, I'm going to quickly interject here one other poll to kind of help set the stage, and then we'll continue with your question, Laura. So I'm going to go to the next poll, poll number 2, which really is, what is your focus now? I'm kind of flashing through polls here. And this was one of the things that we're hearing is, where is your focus now? Are we still, I know there are many firms, and this is nothing to be ashamed of, really trying to figure out still, what do we do right now? What do we do to heal the business, get connected, do where we're going? All the way on up is, all right, we're starting to think about the longer term, or our plans in place now, we're kind of turning to what's next, to number 5, which is, hey, look, we're focused on what's next. We pretty well have the now figured out, okay? So from 1 to 5, you're pretty much focused on the now, to number 5, no, we're pretty well focused on the what's next, with 2, 3, and 4 sort of in the middle. Please let us know where your focus is now, because that will help us be of more help to you, and not only in this discussion, but in other things we're doing, okay? So please go ahead and vote, and we'll count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I don't know, Lynn, looks like are the poll, yeah, here we go. All right. So you can see here, this is very intriguing since we've been looking at this, many more of you out there are really now focusing on the what's next, which is where we decided to primarily shift this particular discussion. So again, in terms of this business of, all right, when we move from now to the what's next, what will your focus be? And picking up on Laura's thing, have we overdone Zoom to the point where if we're not very careful, if the meeting doesn't have a purpose and an objective, if we haven't set up a detailed agenda, we may just be scuttling the airwaves. But by the way, before we get to that, I'm going to add a tip. I don't know, when I look to the room here, I'm usually the oldest guy in the room. And I think I am. So maybe this reflects the fact that I haven't seen my hairdresser in a while, and I'm on my way back to the 60s here in terms of hairdo. But here's something I've done that kind of cuts through the noise. Don't be afraid to mail something to someone. Okay? Don't be afraid to send them some hard mail, right? That's still a very interesting trick for business to business folks. And one of the CMOs I've worked with for many years now, Mike Ludwig, is now at JPW. This is a trick he's used a long time. When you mail someone, we typically have fewer customers. We can mail them something, if it's just a thank you note, to a letter, to a gift, okay? And if you're wondering what to send someone as a gift, to kind of get their attention, you might want to consider Laura's book, and buy one, love it, and send it to somebody.
Thank you.
And by the way, Laura is not giving me a cut of the proceeds on her book. I just happen to be fond of the book. So be thinking about, sometimes innovation is looking for the white space, looking for the space where people are not doing it and being the one who does it, okay?
Hey, Ralph, could we ask Vince Kostelnik to speak?
Sure.
All right, Vince, I've unmuted you.
Vince, what's your thoughts? And you might want to put your video on too, Vince, so we can see you.
There he is.
What you got, Vince?
Oh.
Well, you're still muted here. I'm not hearing you. Okay, he's still showing muted, Lynn.
All right, I'm going to tell you what Vince is saying. Like you're going to hear my voice over Vince, right? So Vince was describing how instead of meetings, long meetings, he'll create a short explanatory screen capture video that gets to the point and allows people to see something quick using something like Camtasia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Vince is right. I find that's really helpful if someone has a question, right? But in terms of a dialogue, we wouldn't, right? That doesn't really create the opportunity for the important dialogue and things that actually occur in a conversation and allow you to sort of expand, explore, build something together, collaborate. And I think that's something that we're all used to doing. One of the things I'm finding really interesting is how many more Zoom meetings it takes to actually get something done, or more emails it takes to get something done. That was something that could be done relatively quickly in person. Right? So I'm wondering what people are doing to try to, back to Vince's point, make them shorter, but at the same time, not make more of them. So when you're shoulder to shoulder with somebody and you're solving something, you can do that pretty quickly, not so easily if we don't have the right kind of tools. And that's back to being deliberate. So I'm really still curious how people are planning to, with their customer communication, their partner communication, what are your plans? What have you written out as a plan on how we're going to move forward in communicating with customers and partners? What are the things you're putting in, not just tools in place, but sort of what is the cadence? What is the plan? How are you going to do that? I'm just curious if people have given any thought to that.
Well, if any of you would like to raise your hands and jump in on this, I'm looking here. We've got quite a few people in the audience. I'm looking. Let's see. Some of you have Gmail addresses, and I'm not sure, what firms you're with. I know we have Rosanna Stokes on the line from Emerald Materials. So Rosanna, I'm wondering, what is Emerald doing in this area? Do you have any views you'd be willing to share with us, please?
Sure. So our plans are in place that we're contacting. My job is to be on the road 90% of the time, and I'm not there. And so I do business development and bring technology to our customers. And so we're setting up regular meetings with our customers. And I find it actually quite beneficial because I'm able to get the whole technical team in front of me. And I don't spend an hour going through things. Sometimes it's only 15 or 20 minutes of some pointed conversation this is how you do this. And here's the data.
And Rosanna, what is your role in Emerald?
I'm business development. So I married, my form of business development is marrying technology and sales together for new products.
Cool, good. All right, well, I'm going to build on that and jump to poll number 3, which is the role of marketing and any function that's here on with us here is that, how front and center has your role been in dealing with this current situation, whether you're marketing or business development? Like, have you been involved from the very beginning and you're shaping the strategy and running it? All the way up to, in this case, down to you've been involved only remotely, where maybe after the fact you've been asked how you thought. So with 2, 3, and 4 kind of usually being in the middle here. So, we've been involved in a meaningful way, but we're called in at key points. Or input is sought in response to specific problems that come up, all the way down to, really we've only been remotely involved. So let us know what your role has been here, and go ahead and vote for us. And we'll be counting down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And go ahead and show us the results, Lori. Okay, so here we're sort of in the middle of the road, okay? And that's intriguing. I mean, and a little higher, good. I mean, most of us are in the function like marketing or business development are sort of front and center, and that's good. But it's still a matter of, this is a time we're focused on our customers and customer connection, so important. And we'll see, this has been an interesting poll to keep track of as we move forward. So why don't we close that out and continue here. And I'm going to go ahead and ask one other input here. I see Beatrice Battle from Sherwin is with us. And I'm wondering, Beatrice, if I can, I'm sorry to do this to you, but not so sorry. Could you let us know, how is this going at Sherwin? How are you dealing with the now to next thing and customer connection? Would you be willing to unmute and share some thoughts with us? Do we need to unmute her, Lynn, or, wait a minute. Yeah, there you are, Beatrice, you're unmute. Well,
yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, actually, we've been having a lot of meetings with customers, a lot of remote meetings with customers that are working fine, and doing plenty of webinars. We have always done webinars, but now they are working even better for us. People are really interested in them. So
do you use those webinars primarily how? As educational, as the business building? How are you using your typical webinar?
Both educational and presenting products.
Okay, and are you still launching a lot of new products now?
Yes, we are. We have launched a couple of products. So.
Okay. Well, listen, that segues nicely into poll number 4. Okay, let me go ahead and pull up poll number 4 here, Lori, which is, all right, we've been talking about a variety of ways that you can connect with customers right now. But for your most important customer connections, we'd like you to focus on that. What is the primary tool you're using? Are we all using primarily online meetings like this one, or what else is in the mix? So here, you may be able to, but I'd like you to focus on the one you're using most of all for the most important customer, okay? So let's go ahead and vote, okay? You can see we've got a spectrum of stuff here, but I suspect, let's just see how this plays out. So we'll let you vote, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lori, pop up the results for us. Okay. So yeah, here, interestingly here, then again, you'd see that online meetings, this is about what I would expect, although it's interesting. And Bob and I have had this conversation, I think with Lori too. There's times voice to voice without the video might be the right thing to do. It might be a stronger way to communicate without the distraction of the video. There's times where slides are necessary. And there's times here where we have an opportunity to be creative in how we're using the mix of both of these things.
So I wanted to jump in for a quick moment. Because what I'm
I was about to ask you a question anyway. We've got one come in here. Go ahead.
I'm just curious. So far, the couple of examples that I'm hearing, and there's nothing wrong with these because I think they're exactly right, is we are presenting. Like in a webinar, we're typically presenting something, and I think that's a valuable way to, whether it's presenting a product or educating, right, or we're explaining something. I'm wondering more about the customer communication that you would have normally have had you sat down over lunch or had you had a cup of coffee, or those kinds of conversations where you're building the relationship or expanding on a relationship. Someone that you might have met at an event who is interested and now wants to have a conversation with you that you might have done over in person. You might have dropped by their office to sit down and talk with them, or you might have met somewhere. How are we going to recreate, or what are your thoughts about whether we even need to recreate that kind of scenario or feeling that occurs in which isn't as easy to convey, right? I think about, like Ralph, you and I have known one another a very, very long time. We could do a lot on the phone and it would not really impact our relationship. But had we just met, I'm wondering how deep of a relationship we would be able to develop if we had not had those interactions in person in the past. So I'm just curious what people are finding in terms of this kind of communication and how they're going to leverage this communication to recreate that kind of exchange or interaction. I'm just curious.
Well, I'd welcome again. This is interesting. All right, so I'm gonna, on that question, I'm gonna pivot and ask, I know Jenna Stahl from Swagelock is on the line. And that's a brand I've revered for many years. And it's, the people who really have an affinity to the Swagelock brand, in my mind, are very emotionally connected to it. It's the place to go when lives depend on it. Jenna, what do you guys do to maintain that relationship? And what Laura's saying, are you doing things just informally to keep it going? Share with us, please.
Well, I'm actually and you can hear me, right?
Yes, gotcha.
Okay, great. I'm actually in the unique position that I actually started my job with our marketing communications team in mid-March when everyone went remote, overseeing a program. Yeah, so, but I mean, to answer your question, I mean, we're in a unique relationship in that our we have a network of sales and service centers that are working more directly with customers buying product. But, in most of those cases, I know that, they've continued to talk regularly with the customers that they have relationships with, including, how do we continue to solve problems, especially since we're serving a lot of businesses that are essential, which is really important right now. So I think really paying attention to what the customer's pain points are, and in that relationship, really focusing on those things in particular for the situation has been at least, how we've approached it. I do know that our sales and service centers are trying to think creatively about what are some other unique virtual ways to demonstrate product or help customers troubleshoot. So, I think we're trying a lot of different things.
So Jenna, the fact that you joined Market Communications for that great brand right as this virus hit.
Yeah, I've had an unconventional onboarding, to say the least.
That's an interesting career direction. We'll be interested to follow your story as you
Thank you.
You've learned on this since you're so fresh. Bob, I'm going to jump back to you for a second here with one of the questions that we talked about, well, like one of the members was mentioning that they're launching new products, or that one of them was, we're stuck in the middle of a value chain that's locked up. Nothing's moving. What can we do to break through and get things going again? Thoughts on something like that, where the communication through the value chain now and next is going to be critical?
I think so. Now I'm gonna sound again like a professor. I'm gonna go deep, go back to the basics. This is a I'm not going to say once in a lifetime opportunity, but it's a rare opportunity for companies to go back and rethink everything that they're doing in some way. And by that, I mean, if you're in a value chain or a value system where, you know, you're dependent on other parties, et cetera, it's time to think about what are the ways in which you can become, perhaps, this is not the right term, less dependent, but more creative in how you can establish more efficient and effective relationships in and through your value chain. A lot of companies, when they, in a value chain, for example, when they freeze up, they're basically, everybody's like literally incapable of doing something because they're waiting for somebody else to do something. And so this frozen environment is not very helpful to anyone. And so the question then becomes, okay, how can we think this through differently? And it's a classic example of just simply going back to the basics, rethinking your value chain. Are there different ways to do the things that you're now doing with an additional partner in the value chain, or removing a partner in the value chain, which can sometimes be efficient and effective for one?
Bob, what do you think the role of segmentation is now in terms of this? Is you think it's more sensitive now than ever before? Is it about the same? What you know, in terms of really understanding which partners should we be playing with upstream and downstream?
Yeah, I think potentially the market segments, the structure of market segments right now is under a lot of should be under a lot of rethinking by different companies. And not just within the value chain, but I think all the way down to the customer, the end consumer. We had an ISBM meeting a couple of months ago that went from B to C. And I think going even back to the end consumer, or down to the end consumer, and working one's way back in a creative way to rethink how those relationships are, what the segments are. Are the segments in the market changing? There are going to be new behaviors coming out of consumers at the end of the value chain. Will those new behaviors impact the structure of the value chain and the various partners throughout the value chain? So these are the things that I would encourage firms to be doing now. There's time. There's time to be able to do this, that normally you would be caught up in every day running around doing things, going here, getting on an airplane, simply just moving. Now there's time where you can actually sit still for a while and think through some really good, I hate to say this, and again, I'm sounding like a professor, but some really good time to be thoughtful and just think about what is happening and all of the ways in which you might be creative about reimagining how things could be around you. So it's not a very practical answer to your question, Ralph, but it is one that I think that's an opportunistic situation. Now I'm going to give you one practical thing, and this builds on what Jenna was referring to, I think. And maybe SwageLock is doing this, I'm not sure. But the use of virtual technology to enhance the connection with all kinds of customers, different kinds of customers or customer segments, I think is going to be extremely important going forward. And here's what I mean by this. What I mean by this is we've worked at Georgetown with some illustrative ways to use virtual reality. Imagine a situation where you have customers and you want them to do a plant tour to see what your plant is like. You would normally fly them in, spend a day with them, taking them out to dinner, giving them the plant tour, putting them back on the airplane, and so on, for an important customer. Imagine if you could do that using virtual reality. In other words, the customer can, in their office, put the headset on and walk through the plant with a guide that takes you through in a 15 or 20-minute walkthrough, or maybe even at the most 10 minutes. I think virtual reality starts to drop off after 6 to 7 minutes. But what I'm saying here is this is the time now to rethink which are the customers and the customer segments that would be very happy to have a virtual tour, and what are the segments that would say, no, 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 I want to walk the floor of your factory. I want to see how you do things before I invest in you as a supplier to my business. Yeah, so there are things that I want you guys to be thinking about that are a different way to look at the market situation.
I think that's an excellent example, Bob. Again, I was thinking something similar. How can we borrow, back to your comment, what can we borrow from other industries or that we're experiencing over the last 6 weeks? What are the things that have come up in the last 6 weeks with conversations with customers that have required us to be more innovative or to revise our process? Those are the things in the debrief we should be talking about right now. So people who want to see something in particular, how do we borrow virtual tours? I mean, let's face it, the home industry has been doing virtual tours for quite a while. We should be able to do virtual tours of our factory. So that's a great example, and have them available, because it's going to be a while maybe before everyone could come to a factory, or lots of people might come in. So that's my point earlier. What are the things that you've had, sort of the mother of invention, right? That's been going on for the last 6 weeks. What are you doing that's changed? Not what have you continued to do, but what did you really have to change, and how could you make that into something for the future? I think is the question I'm curious about. So I think that's an excellent example, Bob.
This idea of bringing more tangible into the virtual, and also building, one of the things I think we're seeing is the chance to build these digital technologies into the offerings themselves to make them more valuable. We're sort of experimenting with now. The other thing I'm thinking, talk with people too, it might be a time to go back and building on what Bob was saying here, and it, we're seeing business go up, go down. We're seeing a whole bunch of prognostication on what's going to happen, but a detailed value chain analysis. All right, what is going on through the value chain? And I've mentioned it's time now to be a good citizen of the value chain. If you're in a value chain that's locked up, remember all the things that flow through a value chain. What drives a value chain, of course, is value, but cash, offerings, information, prognostication, you should excuse the expression, bullshit, conjecture, all kinds of stuff are flowing through value chains now. And stopping to think about how do we be a good citizen to keep a value chain open so that it has a positive impact on our business. Now, again, I'm looking at the chat feed here, some good suggestions. A good old friend of mine who I haven't heard from in a long while, Beat Meyer, we worked together a long time ago when he was at UBS, is suggesting, Jerry Katz does a really good job of doing virtual voice of the customer right now. And he's online. He can probably chime in on that one. Before I may call on you, Jerry, here in a minute, but I'm going to give you a pause. I want to go back to another couple of polls here. We're going to do these back to back, which is really just a temperature, check on a couple of other things near and dear to us. So I'm going to ask, the poll number 5 is on what's happening to your marketing budget. And I'm seeing there's certainly some chat going on this in the background, and maybe we should get on and take a check on this. All right. So, from, hey, our budget's actually going up, to, whoa, it's going way down, to, yeah, we got a budget, but no one is spending anything right now. Or you really don't know over the next, everything is held. So, is it increased? Is it remained the same? Has it gone down? Is it basically frozen? Or really, is it still pretty dynamic? Okay. So to ask you folks to vote on this, please, and I'll count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And Lori, if you would show us the results on this. Wow, what an interesting spread here. Okay, it's really interesting. Well, of course, no one is complaining that their budget has gone way up, and that's not surprising. But it's interesting with the percentage of folks where the budget is sort of hanging the same. I really am wondering what's going on with everybody's trade show budget. I know that, you know, in business to business, trade shows is a big deal, and most trade shows have been shut down. Let's just take a look at another question that comes up, and let's go straight to poll number 6 here. What do you think the impact on revenue is going to be for your firm, from your perspective as a marketer now? Is it really too early to tell? Is it going to be downward revenue impact over the long term, downturn over the next few months, and things will return to normal? Or for some of you, like, it might be more connected to things that are absolutely essential, maybe not too much change. And then, or, you know, when the smoke clears, revenue will grow. Okay. So again, I own these polls, and I'm sorry that they're so colloquial, but I'm trying to be friendly and asking you these questions here. So what do you think? Go ahead and vote. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, Lori, show us the results here. Aha. So there's still a lot of confusion on where it's if you look at these percentages. So it's too early to tell the downward, but there's still a significant percentage that basically say that when things move on. This is a very interesting data point, and it's changed quite a bit even since the last poll. Okay. The last poll that we did here a couple of weeks ago, there was a lot of it's really too early to tell. And I think things were a little more negative looking at this. Let me go ahead and continue then with some questions, but I'm going to go call on Jerry Katz or Bob Thomas. They both work for AIM, I guess, right now. I'm sorry that we renamed you, but Jerry, your thoughts, Jerry, I'm going to ask you to unmute and talk about, you know, your voice of the customer is your stock and trade, and we're talking about building customer connections now and in the future. Thoughts on what people should be looking at in terms of particularly coming out of this, as it comes out. How do we begin turning on connections moving forward? And I, you know, an interesting question: when is there going to be, in your view, live visits? Thoughts?
Well, I wouldn't want to be in the airline business right now, because the virtual tools. Wait, let me back up a second. So far, we've been talking about customer interactions for business purposes, our real customers who are prospects for what it is we do. I'm thinking of it from a market research point of view. And the question is, how can I engage people who aren't necessarily my customers, but just to understand their needs? How can I engage them in market research? And these tools have become so easy that let me say one other thing. Traditionally in market research, for qualitative interviewing, you want to be face-to-face. However, that's often not economically viable. And so in many cases, you revert to the phone. But I think there was always a reluctance to be on camera. And I think the biggest impact of all of these Zoom meetings is we're all now very used to being on camera. And so I think that I think this is going to be a part of market research going forward, instead of getting on an airplane and flying out to that customer. Bob, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to mention there was an article in the Wall Street Journal today just on this topic, Jerry, and that is a person who's the head of their design practice at McKinsey, I believe, has said, I've been locked in. I spend all of my time on airplanes, but now I've been doing voice of the customer directly with customers, and it's been a wonderful experience. And she's able to do the customer walks through the house with them and talks about things that they would never have talked about in a business-to-business environment. So you're right on there with that. Cool.
You know, Beat Meyer has been sending some interesting stuff here. Beat, I don't know, you just sent a very interesting chat input in here. Why don't you unmute and come on and just share with us that last thing that kind of adds to what we were just talking about here.
Hello, Alf. It's Beat from Switzerland. Hello together. Yes, Yes, you thought about the 3D printers. I was just developing the thought further that was mentioned about the virtualization, so that the 3D printers, which become, I think we can imagine that in 5 years or in 10 years, everybody has 3D printers and prints a poster maybe. But the latest thing I've heard recently was about a medtech company from Korea, where they say, you have to go to, if you are ill, then you have to go to the doctor, they make a test, and then you have to wait 3 days and until you get the result. That they are working on a device, you can say. It's a kind of micro lab where they take the blood or whatever they need, and you will get the result almost immediately. So this kind of analytics at the point of care, or analytics at the bedside. So yes, I think it goes this far. And if you think about somebody mentioned before about the end consumer becomes the focus, then definitely in this case one of the end consumer, the patient, he is almost close to this device, and it doesn't. So the value chain, what you mentioned, Rolf, I think we have to think about, or kind of the supply chain, will it be reconfigured? Maybe that's the point where we have to think, is a lab anymore needed, a specialized lab where all the probes go and they make the tests, or should I look for a new business model if I would be a lab?
You had actually, floated something by, which I think is an interesting idea, because, we're B2B, so typically fewer customers, bigger transactions, more complex things. And the thing that floated by here was a bedside 3D printer.
Analytics, like a lab, kind of, I think now.
I'm building on what you said, though, in that.
Oh, yes, okay. It can be a bedside printer, of course, yes.
Well, but the deal would be, for the right customer where you're doing rapid prototyping, you could send them a 3D printer. You could be sending them 3D models and fast prototypes. And if they didn't have the 3D printing, and many B2B customers now have 3D printing, but it would be worth the investment with cost of 3D printers going down. So particularly if you were in a situation where fast prototyping were part of what you were doing, exactly. that could be an interesting addition to this virtual network. That's a kind of a leap forward in my mind, and be thinking about it. So listen, we're moving through. It's always amazing to me how fast an hour goes by when we do these. So be it, thank you very much for jumping on. That's an interesting idea. Laura, let me jump back to you. What are the most important questions that you're asking your clients, and that we should be asking one another now as we start this emergence from the crisis situation?
So I think that's a great question. And one of the conversations we're having is, how do we be careful not to do everything in such a self-serve way that we end up commoditizing ourselves? And I think that's an important thing, because quick story, very, very quick, because I know we're short on time. But when I was a young person in the old days, you actually had people who attended at the gas station. You pulled in, right, and there was a human being there. So my mother, because I was too young, obviously, to drive at that point in time, no matter what, always went to the same gas station, no matter whether it was on our beaten path or not, because she had trust and a relationship with the gas attendant. He always checked the oil, he always checked the water, he always checked the tires, so forth and so on. Once that particular gas station no longer had people, and there were more than one person working there. This person didn't live there 24/7. So there were several people servicing this gas station. But once the gas station no longer had people, right? And my mom just was forced into pumping her gas, which is when, at a very young age, I learned how to pump gas, because my mom doesn't pump gas. She wanted to have help. The point was, it no longer mattered where we went and got gas. All that mattered was, as we went by, if she needed gas, which one was on the right side of the road and which one was cheapest. So I think as we move forward, we want to be careful about all the tools that we put in place that self-serve, so that we don't commoditize the relationships that we have in the future. And that's why I've been asking this question: what is your plan to be deliberate, to be intentional, right? to be disciplined, not just using tools that allow you to be more efficient, right, and easier, but actually because one of the great things you talked about in the value chain is all the different things. And one of the most important components in the value chain that often gets overlooked is the people component, the relationship component. So I'd like to just throw that out there. And and so we're working with our customers, in answer to your question, Ralph, in how to build a more deliberate, disciplined approach to customer communication. One-on-one, one-to-many, all different kinds. How do you look at, back to Bob's comment, how do we look at our customers? How do we create tiering or segmentation and different kinds of communication based on their needs, the frequency of communication, the kinds of communication that they most often need, those kinds of things as well, in answer to your question. I hope that was helpful. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, and I'd like to put some highlighter on that. It was what we thought at these meetings, that there should, because the words go by, and I'd like to highlight some of them sometimes, is the, the issue of, to me, a lot of that builds to, and I've been tracking a lot of discussion on this, on how important brands are now, and the unique feature of your brands in the face of the people, the nature of the interaction as we kind of go through virtual channels, to make sure that your communications and your style and the things that you do personally are so important in business to business. Remember, again, playing professor here, value is functional, economic, and emotional. And in so many business to business situations, the functional and economic parts of an offering become commoditized very quickly. And the emotional component is what drives the sale. And it's almost always that way. So as we move to these virtual things, how do you accentuate and make sure that everyone communicating through these virtual channels knows what you want your brand to mean, and that you might have the only chance to differentiate your offerings now and when you come out by being fastidious about that? Okay. So Bob, well, actually, I tell you what I'm going to do here, and by way of playing, well, I've got a few minutes here. I know that Ajay Kohli was on the line. I'm having trouble here with my mouse to get to. Ajay, Ajay is one of our fellows, and I think he's still on. Yeah, he is. Ajay, why don't you unmute? Weigh in on this for us here as we get into our last few minutes. Ajay, you're down in Georgia, and how's it going? And what would your thoughts be?
Yeah, put me on the spot like that.
Absolutely. Well, it's a professorial thing. You do it. I do it. You've done it to me. So.
Yeah. So I think I would say I resonated very much to your last comment about the value of brands. Very much. So 2 or 3 thoughts really. I think the anecdote that Laura communicated was right on the money. You can match up functionality, but what drives the sale is the emotional value. And I might add to that, not so much in a B2B, but in a B2C, self-expression also plays quite a bit of role. So your point about brands being important is right on the money. The second thing that I was struck by is absolutely right. VR, augmented reality, virtual reality. We can do so many things using that things are going to change, especially because now we feel more comfortable being in front of a camera, as I think it was Jerry who pointed that out. Yeah. So people's behaviors are going to change now. And I think about that from an educational standpoint also. I think the changes that we are experiencing right now are going to be here to stay, at least in some form, once we are past this pandemic.
Yeah. So I think it's this business of doing a categorization of what to keep, what to move on, how to be more innovative, what channels do we turn on, all important things we've covered here. All right, well, I'm gonna move to moving to our poll number 7 quickly. And Ajay, thank you very much. Thanks for putting up with me, putting you on the spot, but I saw you online, I couldn't resist. Let's, we've talked a lot about this, okay? What is your prognostication? What do you think the business to business environment will be like a year from now? Is it going to still be much like it is right now, 1 year from now, or will we go back to where it was before? You know, and again, I've got 2, 3, and 4 in there, kind of anecdotally. You know, you can kind of turn a dial here. Is it going to go back to the way it was before, where, you know, all of the online stuff will go back to where it was, and all of the non-online stuff it'll be the same it was before? Or we're going to just be mostly at distance virtual. There'll be no more offices. We'll all be working at home. So go ahead and vote, please. Again, for one, a year from now, it's just going to be status like it is now. We're not going to see much change from now. Or a year from now, will it go back largely to the way it was before everything started? Okay, so vote for us, please. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, Lori, show us, this is an interesting prognostic. Okay, so as you'd expect, most of you are saying it's going to be a mix, okay? No one is saying it's going to be like it was before we started, and no one is saying it'll remain the way it is now with a percentage. So that's an interesting data point, because I think we're going to find the golden mean in all this. All right, well, we're right at 2:30 now by my clock, maybe one minute or so over. And I want to thank all of you. Thanks to the people I cold call. Special thanks to Bob and Laura for being on the line with us and sharing your wisdom and your thoughts with us on this. I would say, before I turn this back over to Lynn now, though, there will be one more poll I'd like you to all tune into, is this is a time to take advantage of your network. Social distancing is a term that I find it's used for prisoners that are bad in a prison. They get socially isolated, okay? Stay connected. Social isolation is not what we need. So before we sign off here, give us your candid feedback on this town hall. Was it, might have been an interesting way to spend an hour, but didn't cover what you wanted. Through to, this gave you some important things to be thinking about, and was outstanding. So don't be bashful about this. We making these up as we go. We're trying to keep them as interactive as possible and bring you real thought leaders like Laura and Bob, as well as getting you involved in discussion. So go ahead and please vote, and say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and Laura, you may want to share those results. That would be fine with me. I think I'm not bashful about it. Good. Okay, well, thank you. And I think we'll be tuning these things in as much as possible, and would welcome your inputs on how to make these things better. What topics would you like us to cover? Who would you like to see? Okay, and on that note, I think I'm going to turn it back over, after a thank you to Bob and Laura one more time. I'm going to turn it back over to Lynn to wrap things up.
Great, thank you guys. So what you have on the screen right now is the contact information for Laura and Bob and Ralph. And all of them have said, hey, if you'd like to chat further about this topic, or you want to follow up on any of those things, you feel free. On the right side is Rand, Becky, and myself from ISBM, and we'd love to hear from you too if there's anything we can do specifically to help you or just to learn more. You will get a copy, a link to this video recording. It'll come out in about 24 hours or so and be on our website at isbm.com, where you can also find all of our previous town halls and our webinars and our list of new courses that are just coming out. We've completely redone all of our course offerings. And so you can see here in the upcoming days, the courses are now multi-days, but only a few hours a day. And we're using all of the best practices that we get from our faculty who've been teaching, like Bob Thomas, and others like Jerry Katz, who have been doing this as part of their business world. And we've learned from each other, and we've learned from these tools that we have. And so we don't know if we're ever going to go back to face-to-face for courses either, but this has been very exciting to see how well it's received, and the fact that we break it up into a few bite-sized pieces seems to make all the difference instead of a long day sitting in front of your desktop. Plus, again, if you've missed anything, feel free to visit our library. So thanks again to everyone. I'll iterate again, Ralph, what Ralph said is, please let us know how we can help and what you're interested in. We really appreciate that.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us.
All right, so we're gonna let everybody drop off. The three of us are probably gonna hang out here for a little while. If you choose to, you'll probably hear the back conversation